This is a really good question here. How is your arrangement so clean? So this is a really good question. So one of the biggest ways you can know if your arrangement is feeling good is you have to be thinking about things in terms of sonic spectrum, or not sonic spectrum, but in terms of like the frequency range. So for example, if we were to go to like the chorus here, we've got piano, which is covering a higher spectrum of frequency, right? So if we've got this, right, so that's higher. Then we've got another thing that's higher as well. This is also more textural, so this is covering something that is different than what the piano is covering. Then we've got the low end here, which is a whole different frequency spectrum. You need to keep in mind that that bass also has a lot of bite to it, so that's also taking up some space up higher. The strings are also covering a lot more of the mid-range, but also some of the upper spectrum. But there's also something happening different from an articulation standpoint. So when you're thinking about arrangement, there are actually several things that you're thinking about when it comes to arrangement. The very first is the actual frequency, which is nothing more than pitch. Like when we think of frequency, it's really easy to be thinking about frequency like this, like looking at like an EQ. When I'm talking about frequency in terms of the arrangement, I'm talking about frequency specifically as it relates to pitch. How high or how low is it? And a good arrangement is going to have a healthy blend of lows, mids, and highs. And so when you're thinking about this from the perspective of arrangement, that's one component of arrangement. The second component of arrangement is texture, which would be the articulation. What is actually happening with XYZ instruments? So if we're thinking about a piano can articulate a handful of different ways. A piano can play things that are going to function a little bit more like a pad, which would be just whole note chords, right? They can also arpeggiate, they can pluck, they can do all of these different types of articulations. So when we're thinking about arrangement and having a clean arrangement, a big part of it is having a healthy blend of sustain, pluck, and other articulations that are going to fit together to do whatever it is that you want to do in that particular arrangement. So in this case, I'm starting out with a little bit more of a sustained arrangement at the very beginning, right? So if we think about the start here, this is where the vocals would come in. The piano is doing something somewhat melodic, right? This would be kind of like a counter melody. It's going to be pushing against the vocal a little bit, which can be a really useful and powerful thing. It's also a highly repeatable melody, which means this is something that we can continuously come back to throughout the composition. Now, this is composition that we're talking about, which is tied into arrangement, but that piano is playing a counter melodic aspect, right? Everything else is playing a more sustained element. We don't have bass, which means I'm saving the bass for once we get into it a little bit more, right? So then we get to this first chorus, listen what happens, and really pay attention to the actual pitch spectrum. We have more pitch represented in this chorus from the low end all the way to the high end, and the vocals are also going to be in here, which it's a female singer, so she's going to have a higher frequency, right? Higher pitch. And we're also going to be processing it to have more breath and more air, so that's also going to be adding some of that shimmer on the top. But on the bottom, we have this nice filtered bass, and then in the middle, we have the staccato strings, which are changing the entire articulation. So if we kind of get into this, I'll start just a couple bars back and then push into the chorus. Really think and pay attention to what are the actual textures that are happening beyond pitch. It's more than just pitch, it's more than just frequency, but it's what are the actual instruments doing that is unique and textural. And here. So all of a sudden now we have something sounding quite a bit more textural here, right? The strings dun 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 dun. But notice here the other powerful thing that we can do with arrangement is actually utilizing duplication, but with just different articulations. Like the piano is doing the same thing the strings are doing. Right? But the piano is not doing dun 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 dun. I'm letting the strings do that. The piano is functioning differently, even though it's doing the exact same melodic content. It's got the same melodic content, but it is doing something different functionally in terms of articulation. The strings then take that, we add some rhythm to it, we add that staccato vibe to it, so it's gonna have a little bit more cut, a little bit more of that push, right? And then the only other things we have are these two elements in here, which are a little bit more textural. Right? we got the bass in there. Obviously, that's not textural. That's the bass. I was kind of meaning to show you the other two things, but those things are more textural. Those are kind of like the ear candy, if you will. Much less important. Like if those weren't there, it's not the end of the world if it's not there. But those are just kind of adding some of that nuance and intrigue through it. And then I'm applying that same kind of principle, that same kind of concept of arrangement throughout the entirety of the song, and trying to do things in a way where every part of the song has its own unique piece of that arrangement puzzle, right? So I'm not going to be overly repeating something because that gets boring. And instead, I want to be pushing and pulling. I want to be utilizing dynamics. I want to be utilizing all these different aspects of arrangement that are going to help make it so that as someone listens to this song, they're not bored out of their mind. They're not thinking, oh yeah, I've heard this already. Oh yeah, I've heard this already. Let's do something different, right? Instead, it needs to be always like, oh, we're going somewhere. Oh, we're going somewhere. Oh, we're going somewhere, which keeps someone really interested in what they're listening to. So we go from this chorus into this instrumental, and notice what happens once we get out of this instrumental right in here into the verse. Everything sparses down. Why? Well, because that's super dynamic. It's going to help make it so that the vocal is going to cut through a lot more, saving room for that. We're also removing the low end, which is making it so that when the low end comes back in, it's very interesting. It's very unique. And so arrangement is a lot more than just like throw stuff in and hopefully it sounds good. It's not a guessing game. It should be strategic. And the better I am at, like, the more time I spend doing it, the more I can just make these decisions very quickly, right? Like I don't have to think about this stuff as much as I maybe used to. But when you're doing this, you need to be thinking about, okay, like how am I adding push and pull? How am I making so my arrangement is actually truly going somewhere? So let's listen to this instrumental here going into the verse and really pay attention to how there are always these little new things happening every 4 bars to just push the whole thing forward. Something different. No bass. Very simple. It's stripped down here. And then here we go. The low end is here now. I'm not adding strings here. Like I could have added strings, dun 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 dun, but that'd be too much too soon. I want to hold off on that. No. You got to wait till we get to the chorus for you to get to those strings. I want to wait. I don't want to give you too much stuff too soon. If you give too much too soon, it's like showing your hand too early. Like I want to make it so that it's like no. You got to wait till later on in the song to hear the best part, and that is how you keep a listener engaged. That's how you make it so that last chorus, or as you're getting closer to that last chorus, that's when you get people who are saying, holy crap, that's sick. Don't give it away too soon. If you give it away too soon, you're missing out on a lot of opportunities just purely from an arrangement standpoint. Obviously, how you would mix this is a completely different conversation. But when you're thinking about arrangement and how do you have a clean arrangement, it's not about having a ton of different things going on. It's actually about utilizing smart layering, making sure that you have elements that are covering what the other element does, but doing it in a different type of timbre, a different type of texture, a different articulation. So if we look at this big chorus now, the main thing is that dun 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 dun, right? And the strings, which is doing the exact same thing, is happening in the piano, right? So the exact same thing is happening in the piano. It's just a different articulation. And then we have bigger bass, right? Because I want to amp it up in this chorus. It needs to be amped up. I want it to be brighter, right? And then we've just got bigger drums, bigger drum production. We have a little bit of a rise in there, nice hit. The cymbals get changed. I have now a hi-hat going on, grooving, a little bit more distortion on that. But other than that, like this sounds huge, but if you think about it, the piano and all the strings are doing basically the same thing, just different timbre, different articulation, different instruments. We've got 2 bass elements doing the same thing, but they're just big. We've got this pulsating element here, which is just textural. That's just textural. And then we've got the drums, and drums are kind of its own unique category. But even look at the drums. We have a metal hit, a snare, kick, hi-hat, and that's it. That's all there is. And so when you're thinking about this, you don't need to be thinking about, oh my gosh, I got to throw a bajillion things in here. Like I've got 58 tracks in here right now. But in this big chorus, I don't have 58 instruments happening. Your arrangements do not need to be so big and so dense that you're utilizing all these tracks. It's all about smart layering. And yeah, I can repeat this all day long until I'm blue in the face, but I think you understand what I'm trying to say. When you are arranging, it's about 1, 2, maybe 3 things that you're really trying to get across to your audience, and utilize smart layering, smart articulations, and smart textures, and you will have much cleaner arrangements.